Don't let YouTube decide what information you get. That's your choice. YouTube is deleting our videos and cuts you off from a source of honest reporting. Make sure you don't lose access to NTD's news content, and take a quick moment to subscribe to our newsletter so no matter what happens here, you'll keep your access to a trustworthy news source.
The Department of Homeland Security says it's banning imports of silica-based products made by forced labor in China's Xinjiang region. This is part of the Biden administration's effort to continue combating the Chinese regime's state-sponsored forced labor and other human rights violations in the region.
Effective immediately, CBP personnel at all U.S. ports of entry will detain shipments that contain silica-based products made wholly or in part by Hoshine.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection issued a withhold release order Thursday on silica-based products made by the Chinese firm Hoshine Silicon Industry and its subsidiaries. It also includes materials and goods derived from or produced using those silica-based products. Silica is a key raw material in making components for solar panels, electronics, and other goods.
This order was issued because CBP has information reasonably indicating that Hoshine uses forced labor to produce its silica-based products.
Mallorca says the U.S. will not tolerate modern-day slavery in its supply chains, and they're deeply concerned by credible and growing reports of China's state-sponsored use of forced labor and other human rights violations in the Xinjiang region. It follows the previous administration's sanctions on a CCP entity, senior officials, and other products with ties to human rights abuses in Xinjiang.
This withhold release order will ensure we continue to protect human rights and international labor standards, promote a fair and more competitive global marketplace, and reinforce this administration's commitment to deploy a whole-of-government approach to eradicating forced labor.
Hoshine is the world's largest producer of a key raw material for polysilicon. The order is expected to have widespread impact on the solar industry, an industry dominated by Chinese polysilicon producers that largely rely on materials from Hoshine and Xinjiang. The State Department, Department of Commerce, and Department of Labor also announced Thursday similar measures to address ongoing human rights abuses and use of forced labor in Xinjiang, China.
The state of Texas is once again suing the Biden administration, this time to stop the catch-and-release border policy, claiming it's allowing virus-infected illegal immigrants to enter the U.S. Here's the details.
Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton and America First Legal, a group led by former Trump administration advisor Stephen Miller, filed a lawsuit against President Biden Wednesday. They argue that the Biden administration's catch-and-release policy, which releases illegal immigrants into the U.S. while they await their court hearings, costs taxpayers millions of dollars while imperiling public safety. Miller said in a statement, at the same time the administration is urging Americans to get vaccinated, they are resettling thousands of unvaccinated illegal aliens into their cities, towns, and schools, and placing the cost and burden of all health care services for these new arrivals in the taxpayer tab. He argued that unvaccinated migrants entering communities in the U.S. could impact those areas' ability to reach their herd immunity threshold. In May, CBP apprehended over 180,000 individuals illegally entering the United States, the highest number in a single month in 21 years. In the same month, at least 51,000 illegal immigrants evaded apprehension after being detected by Border Patrol, according to numbers obtained by the Epoch Times. Miller asserted that the mass release of untested and unvaccinated illegal immigrants is explicitly contrary to the administration's publicly stated goal of reopening through vaccination. In addition, he argued that the catch-and-release policy has violated CDC guidelines and those of other federal health agencies.
Rudy Giuliani cannot practice law in New York State, at least for now. A state court is suspending his license over his statements about the 2020 presidential election. The court decided that Giuliani's statements on election fraud immediately threatens the public interest and warrants interim suspension from the practice of law. Giuliani will have an opportunity to challenge the suspension in a hearing. The former mayor has not commented on the court's decision, but he retweeted the news and other users criticizing the decision. Giuliani's attorneys say they're disappointed and that Giuliani has not been offered a hearing before the suspension. Their statement says, "This is unprecedented as we believe that our client does not pose a present danger to the public interest. Historical statues and landmarks are an ongoing topic of controversy in New York City. An example of that is sites dedicated to Christopher Columbus. Now the city's decided to move a president's statue over his legacy. NTD's Arian Pazdar has more.
The statue of President Theodore Roosevelt has stood in front of the entrance of the Natural History Museum for decades now. The former president can be seen on horseback with an indigenous person on one side and an African on the other. Now the museum first said they didn't want the statue on their premises anymore. The city has agreed on placing it somewhere else. The city says the people who erected the statue didn't have bad intent, but in today's world it conveys messages of colonization and racism. According to a professor of social history of public art, Roosevelt is part of the museum because of some of his traits.
A naturalist, an explorer, so his significance for a museum of natural history. And it was conceived as an educational component of that.
A tourist visiting the museum area told us history shouldn't be erased.
We're in crazy times right now with COVID-19. That's going to be a part of our history. We're not going to go 10 years from now, go back and erase what's happening today, even though there's a lot of bad decisions being made.
And according to a 16-year-old visitor from Miami, it depends on the situation.
Sometimes things are too controversial for them to be able to continue staying there, but sometimes it's also good to allow people to learn from the past and to kind of show this is what we don't want to do anymore.
The statue will be moved to an institution dedicated to the former president's life. Which one that'll be is yet to be decided. Arian Pazdar, NTD News, New York.
You've probably heard of sanctuary cities and states, but what about sanctuaries for the Bill of Rights? Florida residents, a sheriff, and a congressman are calling on their county to make it happen. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more.
At a public meeting this week, Floridian after Floridian.
The Constitution shouldn't be undermined.
The Constitution created a government with constraints.
Asked Collier County officials to make their county a Bill of Rights sanctuary.
Let's send a message to the rest of our country that in Collier County, Florida, whether you are white, black, Asian, Latino, gay, straight, trans, Jew, Muslim, Christian, or atheists, we will defend all of your civil rights.
Now, what would a Bill of Rights sanctuary look like? The ordinance says the county would be able to refuse cooperating with the federal government in response to federal measures that are unconstitutional. This proposal seems to stem from the pandemic restrictions some governments said only for them to later be ruled unconstitutional. District 2 County Commissioner Andy Solis says there's a problem.
Who is it and how is it that something that the federal government does is found to be unconstitutional? How does that happen? Who makes that decision?
There's no mention of this in the draft. The county sheriff and Republican Congressman Byron Donalds showed their support.
There are moves to try to strip elements of the Bill of Rights as they exist in the United States Constitution. And being the lawful authority here in Collier County, I see no reason why you can't align yourselves not only with the United States Constitution, but also Florida's Constitution.
A decision to consider the ordinance was approved. A final vote is expected to be made next month. Miguel Moreno, NTD News.
Navigating a world of economic madness, you need to have the right guide. What do today's decisions mean for your tomorrow? We ask why. What's the alternative? Uncover the deeper reasons and the hidden influences, and highlight the real opportunities for profit. At NTD Business, we connect the dots for you. Good evening. Thanks for joining us.